Hi, welcome to the recording of the Sheep, Lamb and Wool Price Where to From Here webinar. This webinar was presented by Robert Herrmann from Mecardo on the 29th of July 2020. This is clip 2 of 7 and covers African swine fever and the increase in hunger for red meat in China.
Let me throw you a curveball and Noel sort of short circuited me a little bit about talking about pigs, but let's put a pig up to start with. Two reasons. One is that they always look nice and cute, and at this time of the night, you need something just to make sure that I'm keeping your attention. But secondly, what we want to talk about is what's causing this protein shortage and protein demand for our product around the world. And it goes back to the African swine fever. Now, a short history of the pig population in the world, if you like. There were about 800 million pigs in the world. 441 of them, pigs, over half the number of pigs were in China. China was the country that was most impacted with African swine fever. The African swine fever had been around a long time, but it wasn't and had been mainly in wild pigs up in Baltic countries and Eastern Europe. But it's when it got into China and now Vietnam and Philippines and those other countries where there's a lot of pigs kept for domestic consumption, that was when it really started to impact. So by the end of this year, there'll be 240 million pigs in China. So 200 million pigs, or a quarter of the world's pig population, has been slaughtered in the last 18 months as a result of COVID, as a result of African swine fever. Now, what that really means, though, and you can see on the left there, is that there's a gap from 2018 till now. In China alone, there's a gap of 25 million tonnes of red meat protein. That's a shortage. Now, we know that they won't just, they're already doing things to try and address that. So their beef production's been ramped up a little bit, their chicken imports are up, beef imports are up, chicken production's been improved, and they'll import more pork. But the bottom line is that there's a net deficit of 16 million tonnes of red meat protein in China. Now, just to put that in context, that's 7 times the total Australian beef industry. So the Australian beef production is 2.3 million tonnes a year. Sheep meat is 0.7 million tonnes. We're not going to fill this in a hurry. And in fact, nobody's going to fill this. But what it's going to mean is that there's a demand for red meat protein that had been growing in China up until this African swine fever hit, that just doesn't go away. You just can't turn the tap off. And so that's going to, and we're seeing now the imports of pork out of the US, and I'll talk about our imports of red meat, sheep and lamb into China are certainly reflecting that. There's another factor that needs to be kept in mind, I guess. So going into COVID, we had very strong demand for Australian red meat, particularly from China. And the reason is, if you look at this chart here, across the bottom is gross domestic product per person in a country. And on the vertical axis is the kilograms of meat consumption per person. So as that gross domestic product, or that income, increases, so too does the domestic consumption of red meat protein. So we've got meat consumption increases as GDP increases. Of course, we've now got COVID, which is causing an economic slowdown, which will mean that meat demand will be slowed. But the bottom line is that when countries can afford it, and I'll talk more about China's situation in a little while, when they can afford it, then that their appetite for red meat certainly is in line with an increasing demand for red meat protein around the world. And that, to a large extent, goes to explain why we've had this growing demand for not only sheep meats, but for our beef. And that's represented in markets all around the world.
Thank you for watching this short clip. For more information, please visit www.leadingsheep.com.au.